Hello, and thank you for joining me as I read some more of my book, Revelation. They walked around and were taken aback by the beauty of the library. The large room had very high ceilings, and the walls were paneled in light oak. Each panel had a very detailed wood carving in the center and a hand-painted details in a variety of colors. The room was illuminated by a large stained glass dome. The windows that lined each side of the room had stained glass shutters. The individual writing tables each had a swivel chair that was mounted to the floor so not to move in bad weather. In the very middle of the library was a round table made from opaque glass. Jeanette ran her hand over the table's top as she thought to herself about how lovely it would have been to have had a table like this for her students. "Which stateroom are you staying in?" Kathy inquired. Sandra stopped walking and turned toward her. "We are not in a stateroom. We are staying in a two-room berth." "What? I cannot allow you to stay in those accommodations." She waved her hand at a young man that was standing just a few feet from behind them. "John, please find these ladies a stateroom for me," Kathy demanded. John is the Teutonic's purser. He nodded his head and hurried out of the library. "You do not have to do that. We are fine where we are," Sandra suggested. "Nonsense. I will not have you two educated women down there. Do not worry about the extra expense. Our purser will take care of that," Kathy happily answered. Sandy blushed. "Thank you, Kathy." Jeanette began to wonder how she was going to get around the ship unseen now. She had hoped to have more time to feel more comfortable before she spent any time alone with so many tender morsels. John walked back into the library with the key and handed it to Miss Gables. She turned toward Sandra and Jeanette. "Please join me for dinner tonight around 6 p.m. Kathy asked them as she handed the room key to Sandra. "John, please show these ladies to their new room." They looked at each other and nodded. Miss Gables turned to them and they followed him out of the library down the grand staircase. The stairs were very wide with large oak railings that ran the full length of the staircase. Each post was hand-carved with very ornate detail. Many people could use the staircase at the same time. After they had descended, Jeanette paused for a moment to look up at the grand staircase, and she wondered how many trees it took to make it. They walked down a long hallway until he stopped. "This is your room, ladies." Sandra nodded and Jeanette curtsied. "Thank you kindly," Sarah said as she nodded. "I shall have a steward retrieve your belongings from your other room and have them brought up," John told them as he walked into the stateroom. He pointed out to the room that it had its own bathroom. He then bowed and shut the door as he left. Jeanette let out a small giggle as she walked around the very large room. The queen-size bed had brass bedsteads, and the two windows could open and let in the fresh sea air. The curtains were made of muslin, and the walls were covered with rich tapestry. A large, luxuriously upholstered easy chair was in the corner. Jeanette was having a hard time believing that they were still on a ship. She jumped onto the bed and laid back and rubbed her arms up and down over the bed covers. "We will be attending the dining room tonight," Sandra reminded Jeanette. Jeanette rolled around on the bed. "Why do I have to attend?" she replied. "It will not look good for you if you're not seen eating with the rest of us, Jeanette," Sandra explained. "Okay, you were right, as always, Sandra," Jeanette agreed with a little sarcasm. "Now get in there and bathe." Sandra pointed to the bathroom and giggled. Jeanette raised her hand to her forehead as if she was saluting. "Yes, ma'am," she exclaimed as she leapt up from the bed. As Jeanette bathed, Sandra hurried back to their old room to get her bag with all of the special ingredients for Jeanette's drinks. She arrived at the room just as a steward was entering. She hurried past him to the second room and gathered up everything she needed and hurried back to the stateroom. After Jeanette had finished bathing, Sandra poured herself a glass of white wine. She filled the tub with bath salts and took a nice long hot bath for herself and enjoyed her wine. Once the steward brought up their things, they both put on their finest dress and fixed their hair to make the best impression they could. They wanted to thank Miss Gables for giving them such a lovely room. This new room was going to make their trip a lot better than they had thought it would be. They were very excited to eat a good meal and get out and about with other people again. Blackwood Manor. Anthony walked into the study to find Alexander sitting at his desk smoking a Cuban cigar. "You look like you're in a better mood," Anthony acknowledged. "I have decided to just take my time with everything that is happening right now. I do not like to wait, but some things are worth waiting for. I have sent out some of my best hunters to find those sisters," Alexander explains as he pours himself a glass of cognac. "Time is on our side," Anthony replied as he poured himself a glass. "Anthony, why haven't we found them? Where are they, and why haven't I seen her thoughts?" Alexander tried hard not to lose his temper as he stood up and walked over to the window. He looked out over the gardens as he sipped his cognac. Anthony walked over and stood next to him and tried to reassure him. "Alexander, we will find them. I can promise you that. I have never let you down, and I'm not about to start now. Anthony, I have known you for over 200 years. I trust you completely, but my patience is growing thin," he said as he turned to face Anthony. "I will wait a little longer, but then I will have to call on Osiris Pepi," Alexander threatened as he walked back to his desk. Anthony followed Alex and stopped in front of the desk. "He cannot be trusted, Alexander," Anthony warned. "Remember what happened to the last coven that asked for his help." "I do remember, Anthony, but I want that woman," Alexander yelled as he slammed his fist down on the desk. Barcelona, 1864. Osiris Pepi was called to Spain by Randolph Francisco, the leader of the Devon Coven. He had asked him to come and help him quell a small group of rogue vampires that had been killing peasants by the hundreds. Everything was going well until a young female vampire had somehow escaped. When Randolph told Osiris, he went crazy with anger and he slammed his fist down on the table. He threw his head back and screamed, "No!" A huge black shadow left Osiris's body and moved around the room with such force that it shattered all the windows. It circled the room several times before it ran along the floor, leaving a carved trail in the wood. It threw all the furniture back as it traveled. Then the shadow stopped right in front of Randolph and started to slowly wrap itself around him. A large, shadowy hand moved up his body slowly and up to his neck. It grabbed a hold and held him steadily and tight. It wrapped its arms around Randolph's body and began to squeeze. When Randolph took another breath, Osiris's shadow entered his body through the open mouth. Randolph fell to his knees and he grabbed his chest. His eyes turned completely black and his face started to bulge and move like bugs were crawling under his skin. His body rose off the floor as he wrapped his arms around himself and he started shaking violently. His body began jerking from side to side across the room and hitting the walls and knocking down the paintings and tapestries. He looked like he was having a great battle within himself. Osiris's shadow came out of Randolph's body and stood next to him. Osiris reached down into his throat and pulled Randolph's dark shadow out of his body. He began to roll Randolph's shadow in between his hands feverishly until it balled up. Once he had compressed it into the size of a grapefruit, he then held it there for a moment. He then released it and slowly absorbed it into his body. He stretched out his arms and legs as a shock wave moved through him. Suddenly, his shadow left the room with the force of a great tornado. His shadow then moved swiftly through the mansion and across the grounds. It moved through the trees, swirling through the branches and down the trunks, across the great lawn and into the gardens, absorbing every one of the Devon coven that were on the grounds. Osiris is one of the very first dark warlocks created by Satan's demons, and over the years he has become very unstable. He looks like a feeble old man, but he has become so powerful that all the covens and orders have been trying to find a way to dispose of him. Anthony knows that he needs to get rid of him before Alexander tries to bring him to England. He has a group of dark warlocks and even a few vampires from different covens researching to find a way to kill him. Alexander sat down at his desk and leaned back in his chair, and there was a knock on the study door. "Enter," Alexander shouted. The door opened and in walked Joe Giles, the leader of one of the groups that Alexander had set out to find Jeanette. 3 other coven vampires followed him in: Dana, Kim, and Dusty. "Well, what do you have for me?" Alexander asked. "Nothing, master. We went to all the places on the list," Joe replied. "Where is Julie?" Alexander asked. "I do not know. We lost her in the shipyard. I thought that she had already come back here." Alexander stood up from his chair and walked around and stopped just in front of his desk. "Well, she hasn't, Joe," Alexander angrily shouted as he walked toward them with his teeth exposed and his eyes glowing red. They all backed away from him in fear. He got right up in Joe's face and yelled, "Julie attacked someone. I ain't seeing bits and pieces of what they are seeing, because she did not finish him off. She is now a maker, Joe, and that is on you." Alexander poked his finger into Joe's chest. "No one makes another vampire unless I permit it." Alexander grabbed Joe by the neck and ripped off his head. He threw it against the wall next to the other members and knocked over a Ming vase. Anthony moved like the wind and grabbed the vase before it hit the floor. "I am tired of excuses. I want to find that bitch and her sister," Alexander yelled as he shook his fists in the air. The other coven members ran and cowered next to the door. "Alexander, I'm meeting with David Farina tomorrow. I told you we will find them," Anthony said as he tried to defuse the situation. "You can't kill your whole coven," he said jokingly. "I made them and I can kill them if I want to, Anthony. I don't need their incompetence," Alexander said sternly. "Okay, go right ahead then, but I'm not going to help you train a whole new great group of youngsters." Alexander laughed as he replied, "You were right, Anthony. Get out of here, you idiots, and take that piece of shit with you." The other vampires bowed and picked up Joe's head and his body, and they turned and ran out of the study. Anthony shut the door behind them. "The last group of hunters has not returned yet. Maybe they will have some good news for us," Anthony said calmly. 2 servants hurry into the room with a mop and a bucket, and they start to clean up the blood. "My son was my own flesh and blood, not like these putrid things living in my house. Anthony, you are not my blood, but I consider you my family, the last of my family. You have been with me for a very long time, and you know me better than my own son knew me," Alexander told him. Anthony nodded his head in agreement. "I am not your master, Anthony. I am your brother, and you are mine," as he grabbed Anthony's hand and shook it. "I do not know what I would do without your help with these idiots," he laughed. "Well, thank you, Alexander. You are too kind," Anthony replied. "Maybe because Garrison was born a vampire, you will not be able to see Jeanette's thoughts." Alexander put his hand up to his chin as he thought about what Anthony had just told him. What if he is unable to connect with her thoughts? How will he ever be able to find her? I will find them and bring them to you, if it's the last thing I ever do, Anthony promised. As he thought to himself, one day this coven will be his. He will have Alexander change him. All he needs is to find Akashi. Then he will use one of the spells so he can walk in the sunlight, and no one will ever be stronger than him. But he must be patient. Time is on his side. I am going to the Shaw house now, he told Alexander as he left the study. The two maids finished cleaning up the blood and left the study. Alexander sat back down and finished his cigar. Thank you for joining me, and I hope you'll come back next week.